Iain Dale here with you until 10. There is actually quite a lot of news today, isn't there? We've got a new Pope, it's VE Day, and of course this free trade deal between Britain and the United States, which already people are basically criticising. The first two texts I've got from listeners on this, well, it's not as good as the free trade deal we had before Brexit, is it, Ian? You won't read this out, will you, says David. No, of course I won't, because I'm not interested in anybody else's point of view whatsoever. Nikki says, it's not a free trade deal, it's just negotiating down tariffs and a few add-ons. Well, that's a point of view, I suppose. We're going to concentrate in this first hour largely on the free trade deal. And then after 9, I want to talk about this free trade deal and try and relate it to Brexit. I must be a fool to want to do that, really, but that's what we're going to do after 9. But first of all, let's go into some of the detail because it is right. It is not a comprehensive free trade deal, but it's something, I think it is something of an achievement for Keir Starmer in all sorts of different areas. But it is a free trade deal which can be expanded upon. And I think that is probably the main message from this deal that was agreed earlier today between Donald Trump and Keir Starmer. Well, let's get a few more details from Aggie Chambray. She's LBC's political correspondent. She's been trailing around the country today, having been sent to the wrong place by Downing Street. But the most important thing is she's with us this evening. Aggie, have you had a good day?
I've had a great day, Ian. Possibly not as good as the Prime Minister's day, because amongst all the negativity, I think he is genuinely absolutely delighted by what he's got over the line. And yes, it's not as big a free trade deal as the one that he announced earlier in the week with India. And yes, to a certain extent, it is just bringing down tariffs that were announced on Liberation Day by Donald Trump. But I think he has had a day. And good to note that he didn't know this was going to happen today. It's obviously something they had been negotiating for months, for weeks.
I think we're giving up on Aggie. We'll see if we can get her back where she's on the line, that we can actually understand what she is saying. Kemi Badenoch's reaction to this has been interesting. He said that she has said that this deal shafts the UK. Well, I have to say, I don't see it that way. I think there are aspects of it where I think our negotiations could have been, shall we say, a little bit better. You look at the fact that on beef, for example, where we haven't compromised on food standards, we have agreed to take 13,000 tonnes of American beef, which to me doesn't sound a huge amount, and in return we can now sell beef into the United States, which we couldn't before. However, American beef coming into this country will be tariff-free, but British beef going to America will attract a tariff of between 3.5% and 10%. Now, don't tell me that that is advantageous to this country, because it certainly isn't. And I think there are too many of these sorts of things where, for example, yes, it's great that the American tariff on cars has come down from 27.5% to 10%. That gives us a trading advantage over European competitors. However, when you look at the fact that American cars can come into this country with a 2.5% tariff, I mean, again, how's that an advantage? And given that tariffs on UK cars going to America were 5% in January, you can't argue that that is a huge win. Yes, it will help British car manufacturers in the short term because we haven't got 27.5% tariffs on. But anyway, we'll come on to more of those details in a moment. Well, let's talk to Sir Conor Burns, former UK Trade Policy Minister, who then served as a trade envoy to the US and joins us from Houston, Texas. Conor, very good evening to you. Now, you spent many hours with American politicians talking about trade deals, either at state level or federal. What's your reaction to this?
So my reaction to this, Ian, is it's a bit like a George Osborne budget. You need to see the full detail before you can reach a full judgment. So I think, look, the government deserve some credit for getting a deal with the US and getting the first deal with the US. And there's been brilliant officials inside what was the Department for International Trade, now Business and Trade, who've worked valiantly to make this happen. It's been going on for quite some time. I can see from here that the US administration are writing this up as a win because we're taking our tariffs down from like 2% to 1% and a bit, and they're saying it's a victory for them because their tariffs are remaining at 10%. So I think we want to get really stuck into the detail of it before we declare it a win. But it's a better position than many others are in. It's not a full fat stonking, as Boris would have called it, free trade agreement. It seems to be quite limited and sectorally specific, but it is better than nothing. But I also think it is worth saying that it is from a suboptimal starting point, right? President Trump has completely turned over the apple cart of the rules of global trade. I think it was written by somebody the other day in the Telegraph that it's a bit like that scene from the Godfather when the bloke wakes up and finds a horse's head next to him in the bed. We are all operating now in a climate that is very, very unusual. So fair play to Starmer and his team for getting it over the line, but let's wait and see the detail.
So Donald Trump described it in his press conference as a maximum trade deal, but it clearly isn't because it doesn't cover all sectors.
No, self-evidently it isn't. It isn't a maximist trade agreement, and you couldn't have done a maximist trade agreement in the period of time that this administration has been negotiating with this administration in the States. He's only been in just over 100 days, so the idea that we've gone from President Biden and the auto pen, who weren't negotiating any trade agreements with anyone. I mean, it wasn't specifically anti-British; it was with anyone, to a full cover all sectors, look at all market access barriers in just over 100 days is for the birds. President Trump, has a very graphic way of describing things on occasion.
He does indeed. Did you ever think this would happen? I mean, given the fact that, as I say, you spent many hours in with these kinds of negotiations, did you think this would happen, or did you think it would happen so quickly?
No, I didn't think it would happen quite so quickly. I thought it would happen, right? Because it's such obviously the right thing to do. The US is the UK's biggest trading partner. We don't have, until this point, any form of trade agreement in place, and yet that relationship continues, that we are broadly, in terms of goods, in trade balance with the US. So it was natural for us to reach a deeper agreement. I pay tribute to the officials who've continued to drive this. We should have done this, of course, 5 years ago, and we can go over in future the history of why we didn't. President Trump wanted to do this the first time he was there. It is a big win for those of us who said that the future economic path for Britain was trade agreements with countries beyond the EU. We couldn't, of course, have done this agreement or the Indian one earlier this week if we were still in the European Union. So I think broadly, for trade progress, it is good news.
What's the biggest win for the UK here?
The fact we're first, and the fact that it is a starting point. So whilst you can discount some of the things that President Trump says as rhetoric, he has indicated, this is the beginning. So I hope that what will now be going on within the business department is that we will be engaging in the detailed conversation about the other market access barriers that we would like to remove, the impediments, the difficulties, the grit in the oyster of businesses doing more with the United States. I would like to think, in fact, I'm pretty sure, that the work that has been done at the state level, these non-legally binding memorandums of understanding, or the case here in Texas, the statement of mutual cooperation that was signed last March, I think they've been a brilliant program to educate and granularly inform the UK's negotiating asks at the federal level. But there is still so much more that can be done on terms of, mutual recognition of professional qualifications and so on. So I hope it's a starting point. We're first, that's good. I say we've done it outside the European Union. That wouldn't have been possible. There's an irony in Prime Minister Starmer now presiding over that, because if it had been down to him, we wouldn't have done it in the first place. We wouldn't have left the EU. And I hope it's used as a launch pad to do even more with the US in years to come.
Thank you very much indeed. That's Conor Burns there, former UK Trade Policy Minister. I think we've got Aggie Chambray, our political correspondent, back on a more reliable line. Aggie, you were telling us about some of the measures which will affect Britain. Can we start actually with the car measures? Because the first 100,000 cars that we export to the USA will attract a tariff of 10%. Other countries will still attract the 27.5%. And then after the first 100,000, we revert to 27.5%. Now, that is a win of sorts, isn't it? But does it apply to all UK manufactured cars or just luxury ones?
It's a win of sorts, Ian, and Sir Keir Starmer was very clear when he was talking at Jaguar Land Rover that he wants to increase that quota. He says there is scope to increase the quota, and he said it will come into play as quickly as possible. So look, we are still waiting on some of the deals, or some of the details of this deal. As I was saying to you just before we got cut off, it all happened actually very quickly, and Sir Keir Starmer wasn't necessarily expecting it to happen today. But we can just hear a clip about Sir Keir Starmer insisting this agreement will have a profound impact on this country.
A deal that will protect British businesses and save thousands of jobs in Britain. Really important, skilled, well-paid jobs. It will remove tariffs on British steel and aluminium, reducing them to zero. It will provide vital assurances for our life sciences sector, so important to our economy, and grant unprecedented market access for British farmers without compromising our high standards.
It was pretty clear listening to Sir Keir Starmer talk on the production line at Jaguar factory there that he was pretty clear that actually he felt he had been vindicated in the approach he'd taken to Donald Trump so far. And Donald Trump did heap praise on the Prime Minister on their phone call that happened just before his speech.
Once again, I want to thank Prime Minister Starmer. He's been terrific for his partnership in this matter, the special relationship and external bond. It's really an external and an internal bond between our two countries will soon be stronger than ever before. And we really do. We have a great relationship. I want to just say that the representatives of UK have been so professional. And it's been an honor doing business with all of them, and in particular, the Prime Minister.
And we have also, as you pointed out, heard from the Conservative leader, Kemi Badenoch, who isn't as sure. She's posted on social media to say Britain has been shafted by this argument and by the agreement and by the US president. Here's why she's not happy with the deal.
We wanted a free trade agreement, a comprehensive deal. That's what we were negotiating with President Trump back in 2020. This is something completely different. That's what we need to pick up on. A comprehensive free trade agreement where there are no tariffs. That's the dream. It's no tariffs, not congratulating ourselves on putting up tariffs.
Kemi Badenoch is right to say there are still tariffs very much in place. There's this 10% baseline tariff, which Sir Keir Starmer did say he wants to keep negotiations going. He said he's not going to slam doors, but he does want to go further. There is obviously more to do, but they said, the government saying today, they wanted to get this over the line to protect jobs. He was asked in the Q&A afterwards, Sir Keir Starmer was, whether this was better than 6 months ago. You know, obviously it was good today, but was it better than 6 months ago? And he responded saying, the question is it better than yesterday? And the answer, Ian, to that is yes.
Aggie, thank you very much indeed. That's Aggie Chambray, there, LBC's political correspondent. Right, I'd love to hear your views on this. Do you think, like Kemi Badenoch, that we've been shafted? I have to say, I do not. I think in any trade deal, you have to give and take a bit, and we can always argue about what we've given and haven't taken. But I think that there are some very positive things to come out of this, and it can be improved upon. She's right to say, well, it's not a classic free trade deal with zero tariffs. That is absolutely right. But that was never going to happen with Donald Trump at this moment in time. And also, I wonder what Sir Ed Davey is thinking tonight, because this is Keir Starmer and Donald Trump have basically stuck two fingers up to Ed Davey tonight, because if he had had his way and Keir Starmer had gone in all guns blazing with Donald Trump, does anyone seriously think that that would have been the right approach and that we'd have got this deal today? I certainly don't.